ritual. It's
Yeah,
a good thing.
It's true.
I feel the same way. We have very little structure in our days right now, but this is the thing. Here's the thing. We have one thing. Okay, so everyone who might have a question, click the little chat button, and then you'll see questions. You can type your question there. That would be the best place to put it. If you would like to ask your question on video, write the word video in all caps with your little chat question, your big chat question, and we will get to those in a bit. First, we're going to talk to Ethan about this. Ethan, look at this.
Let me see. Sorry, I was trying to tweet out the link to us. Oh yeah, that's my book. I wrote that. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Did you finish tweeting? I don't want to. Okay, I want you to focus on all the stuff.
I'm just trying to do the proper promo. I'm screwing up my promo with my promo right now.
David and I are going to talk. You tell us when you're done. Okay, David, how are you today?
Well, I'm doing it with this one handle holding the mic, so I'm just like live with.
You can't you're a smart guy, Ethan. You can't prop up the microphone somehow.
I'm not a smart guy at 8 a.m. Maybe we'll kick in later.
Yeah. Oh, he's putting the mic down and type. Okay.
I'm fine, Henry. How are you?
Good. Yeah. Anything exciting happening? Wait. How's your mom?
We haven't heard. She tested for 20 things. 19 were negative. The coronavirus takes a few days. I told her. I said, Mom, you've had this cough for 8 weeks. If somehow you're infected with it, they should grab your antibodies and use that as a vaccine, because other than a dry cough at night, you're 78, you're doing amazing. So she didn't love that. She doesn't want to be she wants to be negative, and that's that. But she's doing great and just waiting to get the phone call. It said it takes days. I mean, she took this test Monday. I think they're telling Friday is when, and so it's Thursday now. She hasn't got a call yet. So that seemed long.
Yeah, for sure. Ethan, let me ask you this: how'd you do this? You have a job working at the Athletic, writing a lot of stories, and you somehow cranked out a book. What was the process? How'd you do that?
It was a little insane. There was definitely a fear of robbing Peter to pay Paul. And so the strategy was to write it in a bit of a different voice. Occasionally I'll write first person for some of the articles on The Athletic, but generally not. And there's a certain style, and you're trying to fit it into the overall voice of the publication you're a part of. But I did first person, not just because of my unrelenting narcissism, though I'm sure that was a factor, but also because it was just a different voice to go with. So it wasn't getting confused in my head as to which was what. So that was one of the strategies. And the other strategy during the playoff run was just to write down every little thing I saw, everything that felt like it was very much of the moment and of the atmosphere of the NBA at that particular time. But yeah, it wasn't too easy.
I think I'm probably guilty of this as much as anyone, but there's a lot of narrative that the Warriors were this happy team. Steve Kerr says things that sound very, early in his tenure, it really struck me when he was like, oh, I think you probably should. I think he said something like, go surfing once in a while, or, have a life outside of basketball, and kind of an offshoot of this Greg Popovich idea that why are you watching games in your free time? You should have a real life and have a family and stuff. That all, it felt like A plus B equals C. The Warriors are more balanced and therefore perform better and win all these championships, and we should all draw lessons from that. But you're in the belly of the beast and lock room every day, and you're like, no, it wasn't like that at all.
Well, it might have been initially. It's just it doesn't sustain. It doesn't sustain alongside all the pressures that come with winning and all the expectations, and eventually it doesn't sustain when you get Kevin Durant and you are the most dominant team ever. It's hard to really make the argument it's even necessary at that point. Before, you could make the argument that happiness was this necessary lifeblood to making the contender function. After getting Kevin Durant, they're just the most talented team of all time. Who's going to even take that seriously as an argument? That's clearly not the most important component. But the thing about happiness is maybe it's not so important when it comes to winning. Maybe we retroactively pretend it is because we want that to be the case, but it is quite important in keeping everybody in the same place, right? If people aren't happy, they're going to go their separate ways because it's just not worth it anymore. And I do think we saw that play out. So there's this funny dynamic where maybe happiness isn't essential to winning, but it is essential perhaps to creating a sustaining winning environment, like say the San Antonio Spurs for 2 decades.
This is super deep. what is happiness? Like, how are we defining that? Like, is it like, hey, we're laughing and we're joyous in this moment? Or is it like on a deep level in my life, I feel fulfilled and satisfied? You know what
I
I mean?
think
Or something.
Don Draper once said it's the moment before you need more happiness.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about this. Marcus Thompson at The Athletic and I talk about how you should be searching for fulfillment in life, not necessarily happiness. Marcus likes to say happiness is ice cream. It's just this ephemeral feeling that can't really be bottled up and won't last. And I think that maybe there is a dichotomy between the two. I think happiness is generally feeling good most of the time. That's how I would define it, at least. I think I'm a relatively happy person. I think I feel good most of the time. It's not realistic to feel good all the time. And I think a lot of athletes might struggle with that because there's this expectation of I'm so great. Everybody tells me I'm so great. I've achieved so much. Why am I not happy all the time? And it can hit certain athletes harder that they can't find that in their life.
Well, I think we're wrong, right? Like when we think that when you make the NBA, you will now be happy, right? That's the assumption of everybody who's just outside the NBA. But like, it's blatantly always been false, right? There's so many cranks in the NBA. I think we probably all go through this thing. When I was first around the Sixers, really the Allen Iverson Sixers in like whatever 99, 2000, and I would drive down there for a year, during which I just was like would drive home just depressed every time. Not depressed, but like just like forlorn. Like everyone's such an asshole. Everybody lies and cheats. Not everybody, but like there's just very little decency and very little joy in that locker room. And I wasn't sure I wanted to cover the NBA at all. And I think in getting into the NBA, right?
There we go. You went out for a minute, Henry, but
you can probably guess what I was going to say.
Oh yeah. Well, just real quickly on it. I talked to a lot of G League players who feel empty. What am I doing? I'm on a treadmill. I'm never going to get to where I want to go. And there's such a feeling of frustration when they work so hard to get almost there, and they get a 10-day and go back down. And I tell them kind of exactly what you guys are saying. I try to let them know, no matter what level you get to, how you feel now, this is going to happen all the time. It's going to be, I'm not getting enough minutes, to I'm not getting enough touches, to I'm not getting enough calls, to I'm not getting enough fame, I can get paid more. It's part of our human condition to a great degree. The challenge is, and this is where I think Steve Kerr probably, I'm sure he talked to Ethan about it, or Ethan, you've heard them talk about it. The challenge is to get the discipline to put that away. And this is where I thought the happiness point is such a great point Ethan's making, because all the Warriors had to do was not let their personal frustrations dictate how they played basketball for 48 minutes and how they practiced as a group. And I thought watching that team just as a coach, generally speaking, they took good shots. Like, at the end of the day, that's all they really had to do to win most games. Take good shots. They didn't have to take good shots. They're good enough to take bad shots all they wanted. They can create shots all the time. They mostly played the right way. Not every team can do that and win as many games as Golden State. That's the point, is they did that. And defensively did enough because they were good enough to do just enough and still win games. That's a mission accomplished for that.
Definitely. And it's just, in a way, though, it's disappointing, I think, from a fan perspective. One of the reasons that we project the happiness on these status symbols, these great athletes, these winners, is that we want hope in our own lives, that we can find this thing and that it exists out there. And I think that's something that I often thought about with Kevin Durant was, dude, you're bumming everybody out, man. If you're this miserable, how is everybody else supposed to go about their life? I mean, I'm not saying he has a responsibility to pretend to be anything other than what he is, but I don't think it helps to sell the game. I think what helps to sell the game overall is perhaps the lie of happiness.
He's kind of a Debbie Downer character in your book, just to be honest. Like, how much of what you're describing with this team being grumpy is just the presence of Kevin Durant?
I mean, that was a big part of it, but at the same time, there probably would have been a natural atrophy and the disease of more, the disease of me, whatever we want to call that disease, that would have hit the team no matter what. But Durant is interesting just in that he seems quite archetypal of where the modern NBA seems to be, with a lot of players who are feeling similarly. And Adam Silver himself said it at the Sloan conference. He said, I talked to these stars. They are all miserable. I was shocked by that. I mean, the commissioner of basketball, that is a crazy thing to admit. I appreciate the candor, certainly, but you're kind of a PR official for the league in a way. And for him to reveal that, to me, was shocking. And to me, it showed that it was such a big problem that he didn't even want to bother to hide it anymore. And so, by the way, I just have to cough a little bit. I'm so self-conscious about coughing into this. I mean, it's 8 a.m., man. It's 8 a.m.
With these young, it's age helps with a lot of things. One of them is perspective. And so I think, and this affects celebrities in general, is that lack of perspective of, yeah, you're allowed to be disappointed. You're allowed to be frustrated. But if you're Kevin Durant, we wrote about this last year, Henry. I wrote about this because you told me to. He was playing with Steph Curry. That's a dream. Every superstar dreams of playing with someone that talented and that special player and that selfless. And if you can't find happiness in that environment, even if all the other guys were jerks, which maybe only one guy was, you would know better than me. You're playing with Steph Curry, done. That is mission, and they're winning. Separate from that, if you can't find happiness there, I would argue something's wrong with you.
Go ahead.
Yes, Henry. No, I want to hear the Henry follow-up.
Hanging over that point is the point that's in your book, Ethan, and it was also in Jackie's story with Bob Myers and Steve Kerr, where they both had some kind of personal tragedy. Yeah. Steve's health and Bob Myers' brother-in-law dying in tragic circumstances, right? And they both kind of said to Jackie, after they'd won one championship, that doesn't help at all, right? In big age shoot around is this is all bullshit, right? And I think there's this, but they nevertheless, they are where they are. Steve had his health problems. Bob had his personal tragedy, and nevertheless they felt, and then Jackie had this amazing question. She's like, look, this is all going to end soon because Kirk Lacob is right here in the wings about to take your job, Bob, right? Doesn't that freak you out a little bit, right? And then Bob was like, look, here's the deal. The top of the mountain is to get a few years of everything clicking, right? That is the best, right? We think the top of the mountain is making the NBA, but Bob and Steve are like, no, we lucked into a few years. Like you're saying, David, of I get to play with Steph, right? I get to work with Steve. That's the goal, is just to sort of grasp this thing for a little while and have it be beautiful.
Enjoy it, yeah.
But the problem is their boss, who exerts a tremendous amount of pressure
Always
from
the
top,
problem. Yeah.
doesn't believe in this as an idea. He doesn't believe this is cyclical. He flatly rejected it. Now it's clear that you can't deny it anymore. The Warriors stopped winning, but his opinion was, I reject the premise of this. That's the loser's mentality. I don't want to be like the Spurs. I want to be like the Warriors for a Spurs length of time. And Bob, you better make it happen. It's your job to make it happen. That's what I'm paying you to do. So they were doing this amid a tremendous amount of pressure that perhaps wasn't realistic. And in fairness to Joe Lacob, perhaps none of this happens without that insane perspective that he has. So in a way, it was difficult, I think, for Bob at least to just enjoy what they had because there was so much pressure to maintain it.
It's such the comment about the owner is so smart. Not too long ago, but a few years ago, an owner reached out to me for some conflict resolution ideas. His star player and his coach were at odds. I immediately said he should contact Chad Ford, and he may have, but he called me and texted me. And he literally said to me, I'm a billionaire. I run these big companies, whatever. I don't know why the player and the coaches can't get along. He just wanted to will that. And I told him, in the business world, I get it, but you don't understand as a new owner the way this NBA dynamic works. You just can't make them do that. You can't force them to get along. First of all, the player's making a lot more money than the coach. The coach is going to find a job somewhere else. He's a Hall of Fame level coach, whatever. And you have to do some things. You can't just order them like they're your children. Because I can make my kids until a certain age anyway, do whatever I want or else. Doesn't work in the NBA.
And you're not there. I mean, they're going to be on the road. They're going to be in Minneapolis in January. You're going to be, I don't know where you're going to be. Maybe at Davos. Who knows? I don't know when Davos is.
Or Jackson Hole.
Yeah, or Jackson Hole. You're not going to be there. I mean, that's something, I don't know if I put that in the book, but it's something that somebody with the Warriors said, is that Joe is all about this 365 days a year, 24/7, never take a break, never sleep. But he's got that house in Montana he goes to.
Bummer, Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not good. Also, look, I think, why would everyone in the NBA be unhappy? Remember the whole Draymond Green, Steve Kerr thing with the blow up in the Oklahoma City locker room. Under any normal circumstances, any normal employment place, Draymond gets another job somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
He was profoundly unhappy with his boss. Like, yeah, but that can't happen. He has to stay with his boss. So everyone who doesn't like their boss is wedded to them until the owner says that it's time for that to change, right?
Yeah.
We would all be unhappy in our jobs if those were the terms under which we work.
And there are these political machinations to it, where are you trying to then get your boss fired? Are you working behind the scenes to do that? Then everybody gets paranoid. But I do think at its root, and Silver talked about the teams of yore, because this was always so. A lot of the dynamics we're talking about were always the case, and always were attacks on happiness. But it seemed as though the teams had more cohesion and more togetherness. They were less atomized. And it's so cliche to blame technology, but let's blame technology. You get on the team bus, these guys are all in their headphones. That wasn't really the case. They had to pass the time together. They were forced to, because they had to confront boredom. Now they don't have to confront boredom in the same way. And it's a dynamic that lets them drift apart. And social media, I believe, in small doses for the regular citizen is fine. My mother-in-law's over here. I love the way she uses it. She posts pictures of my toddler and all her friends, just leave sweet comments, and it seems like a great way to use Facebook. But when you scale it up on the celebrity level, I think it's psychologically deforming, and nobody is designed to actually cope and deal with it. And nobody's going to be all that sympathetic to those people either. Like, oh, so sad, the rich and famous, social media, bad for their brains. But it seems to be the case that they are now acutely aware of being in a reputation management project where usually, or used to be, they could filter a lot of what comes back to them. Now they're highly aware of all the negativity, and they might even be a little bit addicted to the negativity. And it seems to be making them a little bit weird. If we talk about Kevin Durant or Kyrie Irving, those are the two most prominent examples, but I believe it's a widespread phenomenon for sure.
Wait, talk to me about addicted to negativity. That seems like a big idea.
Well, I mean, you've got that loose tooth that kind of hurts in your mouth. You're going to keep poking at it. I think it's a personality type that does that. And if you are motivated by slights, if you are motivated by the idea that people are saying something bad about you and you're going to show them, you can get addicted to that. It certainly seemed like Kevin Durant had a little bit of that addiction, where he would go online and he would confront the people who were saying bad things about him. You know, he'd be in the locker room sometimes and he'd be going off about what somebody said to him. And I or some other media person would go, "Oh, who said it?" And be like, "Oh, 0612 Thunder fan." It's just, well, obviously, I'm not saying you want this in your life, but some part of you is seeking it out. And that part of people before could not really be engaged in the way it is today. And it seems to be something that's bumming a lot of the athletes out. And it's hard to take it seriously if you don't deal with it in your life. If you're not somebody who is so plugged into social media, maybe you say, "Hey, turn off your phone." You know, I hear that a lot. "Hey, turn off your phone." The problem with that is that these guys are so famous that it's going to come to them no matter what. You know, friends of theirs, acquaintances of theirs are going to reach out. Hey, you have to use your phone to just get around, get along in the world. I mean, I need my phone to talk to my wife and figure out things throughout the day. And through that mechanism, people are going to reach out and they're going to say, "Stephen A. Smith said this about you," or "This person said that about you." It is inescapable. They cannot escape themselves. And that's not a good place to be, because I believe happiness is inversely correlated with the amount of time you spend thinking about yourself.
Wait, is that an Ethan original, or is this the Dalai Lama you're quoting here?
I don't think it's a me original. I actually remember Chuck Klosterman on Bill Simmons' podcast just making the observation that since he had his kids, he was happier because he was walking around thinking about them more so than thinking about himself. And I took from that and I thought, I think that there's probably a correlative aspect to that the more time you spend thinking about yourself, especially if it's in the zone of thinking about your own reputation, thinking about what other people are saying about you, that is a mental hell. You don't want to be thinking about that. Like, oh my God, what are people when I'm not around saying about me? What do they really think? You don't want to be thinking about that stuff. It's much better if you're thinking about somebody else. That's how we're designed as human beings. It's not just good to be selfless. I think it makes you, if not happier, more fulfilled.
Actually, this is a great moment for David and I have this little joke, which is, so it's like at some point I went off for like 20 minutes on some podcast, like literally a 20-minute monologue, and then it was like dead air, and he just goes, so.
Well, that's you need the Jade Hoy cricket sound effect for that.
I think it was just a phone call, Henry. I don't like interrupting you. You're saying smart things. I like to listen. No different when Ethan's talking. Ethan, I have a question though. Two questions. One is, and forgive me for not knowing this, is your book on Amazon right now?
Oh, great question.
It can be ordered on Amazon. It can be pre-ordered. It's coming out April 14th. I am talking to the publisher, and I'm trying to get it to come out earlier.
It'd be good.
Just full
I need a couple books to read. I need that book.
But with just the contractual obligations and how these things are set up, very much above my pay grade, I don't know if that's possible, but I'm working. I'm trying to do my part to try to get it out to people because it seems like people they might need some entertainment right now.
Yeah. All right. So second question is, I've helped and worked with Warriors players over the years who have only raved about Steph, raved in a way I don't hear too typically. They also actually had great things to say about KD as a teammate. This was not this last season. What was your impression? What is your impression of Steph? In as much as you've seen him, no one's perfect, but as a teammate and as a superstar in the moment, right? It's one thing to look back as an aging superstar, but he was in his prime when you saw this, changing the world. What's your general take on it?
Just shockingly well balanced as a person, well actualized, and somebody people enjoyed being around even when all that was happening. I still think that there are certain pressures that are inescapable, and being on top of the mountain meant suddenly being the face of Under Armour, and then Under Armour went through struggles and went through trouble, and it's impossible for him to just remain the same guy he was in 2012 all the way through this particular journey. But I do think he was on top of the world. That must have really fed his ego. But there are some theories around him that maybe he didn't totally hate that KD came aboard because the spotlight was just so bright that it was just almost unsustainable. It was unsustainable to just maintain that level of celebrity and intense public interest and going on Good Morning America and all the late night shows. And I mean, I remember like I would go to Warriors practices and people would jump out of the bushes trying to get autographs, and it was just a freaky situation. And people would follow his car for miles and miles and miles. And I think that for somebody like that who wasn't necessarily chasing all the ego benefits that came with it, it was maybe almost too much, and he wanted to just cut it a little bit, just take a little bit of the edge off of it.
But that's pretty common. Don't you guys think that most of these great players, I mean, first of all, it helps to have another great player to win games, which is what it just helps their celebrity. But I don't ever remember talking to a player, an all-star, that didn't want another all-star to come as long as the guy wasn't a jerk.
Scottie Pippen, Tony Kukoc.
Is that? Yeah, right.
Scottie Pippen, Tony Kukoc.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably true.
Well, what happens though, what happens too though is they want it and then they're not aware of the sacrifice that comes with it. And that was often said about Chris Bosh, that it's easy to you don't know the sacrifice until you're actually making it. I think that was very hard on Bosh, and it was probably the right decision for him, but he wasn't happy early into that venture with the big three Miami Heat.
Yeah.
So I think that happens as well. They envision that it will be easier than it actually is. I mean, look right now, Karl Anthony Towns, D'Angelo Russell, now they're together. They've wanted to be with Devin Booker and be the super friends. Me and El Hassan jokes around about this a lot, that it's almost the I'm trying to think about the cliche, the monkey's paw, the Faustian bargain, where you're given the thing that you want and then you actually hate it. That's what he envisions for those three if they actually come together. And I would not be shocked if Amin was quite correct about that. So,
Especially on defense.
yes, well, that's the thing. It's like, well, I thought you were gonna play but no, but it's me, but you. So I think that there's that as well, where they often like it in theory, and they're so used to either getting most of what they want or trying to get all of what they want, that the aspect that they don't like becomes intolerable.
There's also some of the resources are flexible, right? So the wins, you can go all the way up to 82. The income off the court can range dramatically. The accolades, the national TV appearances, your team can just have more of those things if you have LeBron and Dwayne and Chris, right? But the attempts at game-winning shots, very finite, right? And so Chris Bosh now has to swallow, in Toronto, they were all his, right? And now he has to swallow none, one, right? And each day that he doesn't get that, someone's on social media reminding him what a third wheel he is.
Well, I think this informs
that's hard to follow.
This informs how NBA players are, and it kind of bleeds into why people ask, why do the former players on TV seem to hate the NBA and hate the other players and diminish their accomplishments? And one of my theories, because I watch MLB Network when it exists and when baseball exists, the players in MLB Network, they're almost like cheerleaders for the other players. And Pedro Martinez is celebrating the pitchers, and Big Papi and the other offensive players are celebrating the guys right now. And it's just a completely different spirit to it. And I think what's behind that is, in baseball, if your teammate hits 40 home runs, you don't get fewer home runs. You have just as many opportunities to do it. Actually, if he's batting behind you, he's protecting you in a way and giving you better pitches to hit. So there's no real sense of, oh, this is all finite. If this guy's doing better, then I'm doing worse. In the NBA, if this guy's doing better, if he's getting more touches, you're getting fewer touches. If this guy's getting more minutes, potentially you're getting fewer minutes. And I think that is just ingrained into a lot of NBA players, that sense of competition based off just the finite amount of touches that you don't see in a sport like baseball, for instance.
And if LeBron's better than Michael Jordan and you lost to Michael Jordan, Reggie Miller, right? You know what I mean? It's just better if Michael Jordan was the best ever, because that's the one you lost to, right?
Yes.
Or similarly, if Clay can score 37 points in a quarter, but you can't, then you have to have a story as to why Clay has it easy, right? Whereas possibly today's players would just wax all of these players from 20 years ago, right? They have skills that they just didn't have back then, and whatever.
Watching
bigger, faster, stronger.
And way more skilled. I mean, listen, I've been watching some old games recently because I have the time, and I am kind of addicted to watching games. And I saw the semblance of a Euro step in the 80s, but it wasn't quite it definitely wasn't it, but it was close. But many of these players, I've been thinking like a coach for a long time. If you ever saw The Fish That Saved Pittsburgh, Dr. J cannot dribble the ball with his left hand. It drove me crazy when I first saw the movie. Why isn't this guy using his left hand when he's going left? It made no sense to me. Jerry West would only use his left-hand dribble to slow down. He'd go right back to his right hand. And he was one of the greatest of all time.
Just wouldn't work today.
No, I mean, oh my goodness. Even now a lot of times we call it weaking ball screens, which means if a ball screen's coming, force the guy to go to his weak hand. But it doesn't really solve it too much because they're mostly amazing going both ways. It's just a little bit different. Back then it was way different.
LeBron is almost the last of the generation of primary ball handlers who, when they do a Euro step, you can see it's clunky. When LeBron does a Euro step, it's, I am doing a Euro step. I am thinking about every
Right.
step I'm doing. I mean, that's how I grew up. I mean, if I do a Euro, like I functionally understand how to do a Euro step, but it's like the language acquisition phase. If you grow up speaking a language, then it's effortless. If you learn a language later on as an adult, it's clunky. You're thinking about every word as you say it. And I think LeBron is probably the last of that generation of American players who don't get that skill set plugged in at a very early age to where they're not even thinking about it when they do it. And that's not to slight the guys from the past, because they were going against the situation as it was. I don't think that we should denigrate them at all. I think you should be judged according to how good were you against the level of competition in your day, because they are advancing the game and people are learning from them and building on what they do. But yes, I think we've gotten on the generational tangent.
Oh, it's fun. No, I have a prop. Hold on.
Yeah.
Can you see this?
Yeah.
I see it. Yep.
This is the 1977 championship winning Trailblazers.
Wow.
But check out you could.
The game was played in a very small piece of land.
Yeah.
I say that a couple of weeks ago, I saw Rudy Gobert contest his shot 3 feet behind the 3-point line. The guy shot faked. I don't remember who it was anymore. Blew to the rim. Rudy blocked it at the rim. And I think I called Henry the next day. I've never seen that before. To have the ability as a man that size to be able to contest someone from 27 feet and then block a shot at the rim. Come on. In the NBA back then, the picture you saw, you were guarding a few feet of space. Forget about the defense rules. That's all you had to guard, a couple of feet of space. Go ahead, Henry.
A bunch of years ago, it was like Blazers at Knicks, and I'm sitting next to Pete Vesey on Media Row, and Rasheed Wallace did exactly what you described. He was out there, and then he looked like he stopped running. He was so just like not in an athletic position, but then just kind of like whoop, whoop, like 2 steps, and then he blocked a shot at the rim. And I don't think I'd ever seen that before ever. And and Pete Vesey was like, that looked real easy. Like it did. It looked good.
I have a question for Ethan. And I'm sorry because maybe no one else will like this at all. But Rudy on DeLon Wright, someone just commented, it's exactly right. It's the last full game they played. So I'm a huge Kevon Looney fan, Ethan. I feel like he did what Chris Bosh did at a lower level. Obviously, he wasn't as talented as Bosh. A young player that was, a top 5 player in his class coming out of high school, got hurt when he went to UCLA, but really talented player, could do a lot of things. And I thought they cheated by paying him $15 million for 3 years because I think it's worth much more than that, although I think he wants to win. But what's your take generally about Looney when he's healthy?
When he's healthy, I think he's a really good player. And he's also reputed to be a good guy. He gets along with him and enjoys him. He doesn't have much of an ego, but I'm very concerned for him. I have to say, I try not to be biased in these ways, but I like Kevon quite a bit. And I'm worried for his career, just in how his body broke down this season, the medical issues he's had in the past. And it seemed as though he got off on the wrong foot because he got hurt pretty badly in the finals, played through it. And I remember he told me right when they lost game 6 that he was going to not be able to do any physical activity for 6 weeks. So he was delayed in his development and recovery in the short off season. And maybe that had nothing to do with why he was hurt going into this season. But he was hurt going into this season and he was never getting it right. So I agree with you completely. I think Looney is a winning player. He's really smart. He does what's needed. But just given the health issues this season and how they piled up, I, without knowing anything about it, without being a doctor, I'm just concerned. So I hope he pulls through because, like you said, he's got a lot to he's got a lot to give as a player, and
he can guard a lot of we wrote for Troop. He can guard Kawhi. He can guard Giannis. People don't realize he's not just a post defender.
He's a smart player. He's a
very
really
smart
player.
Yeah. Randy asked the question, Henry, about Dr. J. Can we address that?
Sure. So Randy's wondering, would players like Dr. J adjust to today's game if they played today, meaning would he learn to use his left hand in the offseason?
Yeah, so the way I always explain it is, if you imagine like a time machine helicopter, it's a fun thing that I like to imagine all the time. So if you helicoptered the Golden State Warriors now, last year's team, actually this year's team probably too, into the 1970s, and they just showed up to play, no scouting, they would win the game by 3,000 points. It would be those teams in the 70s. That picture you showed is so perfect. We used to say race home first. They'd race home on defense as the Warriors just bombed away, and then they would race out at them and give up dunks everywhere. And if you helicoptered going forward, it would be like the Warriors would be like, what are you doing? We're going to give you those contested twos. We'll guard them real well. You'll make a few as we rain threes down upon you, and we're going to win by 100. But I do think if you did the same thing and then gave them months, not even years necessarily, I'm talking about the best players, gave them just months, you would start seeing it. And then, of course, over the course of years, yeah, there's no question, Dr. J, evolution forces you to develop that. He wouldn't be Dr. J if he could only go one way. Mostly. There's some exceptions, of course, to guys that don't really develop as much as they can, like Lamar Odom, and they're still very, very good. Lamar could have been a Hall of Famer if he wanted to be. But, yeah, the greats typically would – Will Chamberlain in any generation, Bill Russell probably so. The evolution, or they wouldn't be around. Either they would acclimate or they wouldn't get there.
But I would add this, though.
Yeah.
There's we got, with the system that we had in Dr. J's time, a certain bunch of players rose to the top. We have a different system now, which prizes different things. And there's no saying those same players will be the ones that bubble to the top, right? Like there are, Josh Childress's physical makeup isn't totally different from Dr. J's, right? Like he just didn't he didn't get good at those right things to become a star, right? And Dr. J might have been a Josh Childress.
That's what I'm saying. They may not even bubble up at all. That's right. It might have been cut when they were sophomores or juniors, because there was another dude pretty athletic too that was really good going to the rim and could shoot. Dr. J couldn't shoot either.
Right.
So so the competitions, there's a lot more of them.
Do you remember we had a conversation years ago, but like when Jared Bayless was a young player in the NBA, the Blazers at that time were convinced that like if he could just really get a great handle, like he could be special. And he just never really did. Yeah. I think that's right. I think that's basically he had some injuries too. Like, but
that's how Tatum, that's how Jason Tatum has made, and we wrote this last year at TrueHoop. Don used to get mad. He can't dribble. And guess what? Tatum can dribble now. Like he's really improved, not just with his skill, but his reading of the game. You know, doesn't drive into a crowd nearly as much as he did last year. And I said the same thing about Wiggins 7 years ago. He's got to learn to handle the ball. That's where Harden blew up. Durant, somebody wrote this the other day. I didn't know this. Durant was a 6'3" guard, like on his JV team. And and Durant actually was quoted as this. I guess he came back from the summer 6'8". Joakim Noah, Tyrese Thomas, two guys that I spent a lot of time with years ago. They were guards, and they grew so much, but they had those skills. It's one thing that unlocks your game so much, being able to dribble the ball.
Should we take some questions here? Ethan, basically every single time our buddy Gerard joins us and has useful things to say from his quarantine in Manhattan. Knock, knock, knock. This is like the Mr. Rogers part. Oh, who's at the door? Look, it's Gerard. How's it going?
What's up, guys?
Hey, Gerard.
You're in a new room today.
No, I'm saying, it's the second room. The girlfriend gets to take all of the living room when she's on call. Her job is much more important than mine. So,
For sure. For sure.
So back to something Ethan had said earlier on his talk about, happiness and sort of things with these players. And I just wonder this, right? Because we always talk about we want athletes to be real and to be honest and be forthright with it to us, right? When they say things we don't want to hear, it's like, oh, go back to just the illusion of making everything hunky-dory, right? It's like, maybe someone like Kevin is just eternally searching for something and is just a melancholy kind of dude. Or maybe, Kyrie is, or whoever these guys are, right? It's just kind of how it goes. And is it really incumbent on them to have to, turn on the happy face for us all the time? Like for me, it doesn't matter, right? Because I'm not watching NBA or covering the league for that purpose. I'm covering it for like what's actually going on and who you guys are. But maybe it's different for like the casual fan. I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're not wrong. I don't think you're wrong about that. I don't think it is incumbent on them. I think they should be whatever they want to be. But this seems to be an overall issue of celebrity in the modern era where we almost know too much. We know too much. We don't want to know all of this about them. I think, I'm trying to remember the celebrity. Somebody like Cher was arguing on Twitter with people, and I was thinking, I don't want to think of Cher at this stage in her life as somebody who's doing that. I don't want to think of it that way. I would like to believe that they're all like George Clooney, or at least how I imagine George Clooney, that they are on an ethereal plane above everybody else, and that they are not impacted by this. And there's something a little bit almost degrading about being concerned about some haters out there and having it occupy your mind in that way. And it's almost destroying the illusion of celebrity for us all to see it. So I think it's just part of this dynamic right now where we know too much, and in a way it's corrupting the product, but nobody is necessarily at fault for it. It's just what's happening. It's just the dynamic. And I don't know what I would do if I was Adam Silver. It's not a job that I want. If he wasn't completely bald already, I think he'd already be there.
I mean, because it's really like they're just like us, right? I mean, that's what we're really finding out, and it's like we don't want them to be like us. We want to transport back to this time in the 60s and 70s where guys were going to Studio 54 and you had no idea what was happening and what they were doing. But, you know, I'd love those stories. That would be fun.
Yeah, we like a little bit of the dirt. You know, we like a little bit of the unseemly behind the scenes, but I think what we don't like is insecurity. Insecurity is something we recoil from, even if it's very real, even if it's very raw. There's something about us where when we can smell that you want us to love you, then we are going to withhold it. And if we sense that you don't care, then we are going to bestow it. And I don't know why that's how we are. But that seems to be the dynamic, at least with Steph and with KD, where Steph seems like he doesn't need it, so he gets it. And KD seems like he needs it, so he doesn't.
Totally. So, Gerard, to your question, I think, Ethan, I'm going to build on what you just said. Like, you can be however you want to be, right? But if a lot of what comes out of your mouth, no matter, for this is true for all of us, I believe, is kind of worried only about yourself and negative. So like, I'm bummed I didn't get X, the ball or whatever, the spot on the trainer's table, etc. Then that's fine. It's legitimate. You get to be that way, but no one's going to follow you. You're not going to be seen as a leader, right? Because you're overtly not caring about the group, right? So a way to show you care about the group is to not complain all the damn time, right? So, so I think this is a little bit what you're saying, Ethan. If Steph's walking around being like, "How's everybody doing today?" Right? Like, well, only a me problem, but I'm going to make it all of your problem, right? Like, I think that the way Durant behaves is honest and fine, but I think that it's unlikely to get the rest of the locker room excited. Right? They're not going to be like, we'll do anything for KD, right? They're just not going to feel that way.
Well, and Gerard, think about this too, is KD, and I don't pay attention to almost anything that's not on the court. So I mostly just hear from other people, but he seems unhappy because of these things. And yet he is the director of it. There's that great scene in the movie Notting Hill where
Notting Hill reference. Can't wait.
Where Hugh Grant, Julia Roberts has all been out of shape because some reporters see her coming out of a man's home. They have no idea that she spent the night or that they had sex or whatever. They just know that she was in his home. She was saying he's an old friend, and she's bent out of shape. And he said, my best friend slipped in the shower, and she's in a wheelchair the rest of her life. And I'm asking for a little perspective on what really is happening here. And so this is my point. And I, as a dad and a coach, and I don't know KD, and I'm a fan on the court for sure, we're asking for a little perspective for all these guys. It's certainly this day and age, but let's say in a year from now when no one remembers this virus barely anymore, perspective is not a bad thing to have for a professional athlete. It's important to have it. And it's okay for us to ask them to have it. We don't have to judge them too much if they don't, but it's better for everyone if they do, especially for them, if they have some perspective, some maturity as to what really is going on. And so I made this comment, Gerard, on the side of our chat here. He chose Steph, and now he's chosen Kyrie. Okay, let's just see how that goes, because if it goes the way I think probably Henry and I feel, he's going to do a lot more complaining going forward. He made those decisions. He's the engineer of his future, and it's almost like he wants to be unhappy. That's on him.
Fair enough.
He's allowed to have that if he wants, but we're also allowed to call judgment on it.
Can we don't have much time left, but I just love this part. I sort of forgot about it, Ethan, and then reading your book, I was reminded of it. This part where the Warriors are under a ton of fire, and then KD just breaks down like a coach. They ask him if he sees the game like a coach, and he breaks down all of the coverages and why he is or isn't going to pass the ball. And can you take us through that little episode?
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the exact details of it. He was explaining why he wasn't shooting as much, and he broke down the defense and how Patrick Beverley and the rest of the Clippers were guarding him. And, I could shoot, but then I would shoot 40% if I did it, and I'm just trying to win. And he did it in such a way, because he is a basketball genius, that he does. Oh, my son is angry. The pouch is not to his liking right now.
We're kid friendly if you need to go grab
No,
it.
he's okay. He's just a little bit I don't know. I don't know what the deal is with the pouch.
Are you technically
in
charge right now? Are you in charge of
his mom is also helping out. He's just being fussy first thing in the morning. But so bring him up. Well, yeah, I think I will. If he has his morning bar. Asher.
Do it.
Let's see if I can get him. He likes to run away. Asher.
Mm-hmm. He likes to run away. Get used to it, buddy.
Okay. Enjoy your morning bar.
Okay, fair enough.
Asher, I'm trying to cultivate a celebrity here. You have to look like you love your dad. Come on.
Yeah, Steph's kid would do it.
Yeah, you would. Oh, that's something that's in the book, is that's become this weird sort of artifice of the NBA, is the child at the podium presser. But okay, maybe it's wrong to call it artifice. I don't know. So KD is a basketball genius. So he does a pretty good job of explaining the why of it. And yet at the same time, the coaches and internally with the Warriors are saying, this is complete BS. Like we want him, when Landry Shamet is guarding him, to rip through to in the words of one of the coaches, rip through that motherfucker and dunk. Like this is ridiculous. And yet the response was almost accolades, because we're so starved for strategy that even though it was all false in a way, it's still just something that we don't typically get. So Henry, was that the dynamic roughly that was on your mind? Did I capture that?
But then I just want to add this, so on the one level, I'm like, these players are thinking about this stuff in such a more nuanced way than they ever get to talk about. But the other one is, he ends it with, I'm Kevin Durant. You know who I am. Y'all know who I am. I know y'all want to talk to me for the rest of the day because I got so much knowledge, but I got it.
We lost you there for a second, Henry. That's we lost the punchline.
It was super brilliant.
He said, he stuck the landing with I'm Kevin Durant. Y'all know who I am, and I know, you want me to talk to you all the time, but I've got to go. And he's kind of right. You know what? We are all waiting hand and foot in a way, and just like, please tell us your wisdom, Kevin Durant. He's not wrong about the dynamic, and yet the way he's putting it is just a way that Steph would never put it. And while some people probably really love the honesty and the cockiness, other people might be turned off by it. But it did precede him having an incredible game, one of his best games ever, and really backing it up after putting a tremendous amount of pressure on himself. But still, in typical KD fashion, right after the game, being just deeply unhappy and angry at the end of, after doing it. So, yeah.
My last question is, if we get more in the chat, let it rip, guys. If you want, how do we think about all these injuries on the Warriors? Is it anybody's fault, or is it just dumb luck?
I think it's probably hard to know. Obviously, I think part of it has to be that they just gave their life force for a half decade. In order to try to keep this thing going. And it was beyond the bounds of what human beings can realistically be expected to do. But they did change up their medical and training staff again and again. And people left because they wanted more money to live in the Bay Area. And so there is this open question of whether the venture capitalists running the Warriors got the talent and then maybe skimped elsewhere. And maybe it came back to bite them. I don't know. But I think it's a distinct possibility.
Okay. David, Gerard, any other questions for Ethan?
What's your? Yeah, I have a question for Ethan. What's let's assume that the season is a lost cause from Golden State, no matter what. They draft a nice player who's not going to help them next year. What do you think about them going forward for the next 2 seasons?
I think they could contend, but everything has to go right for that to happen.
More so than before.
Yes, yeah. Everything has to. They got to hit a few cards on the river or whatever gambling analogy you might need, and they might trade down. They might trade the pick. Who knows? But if they are keeping the picks, their pick in this theoretically upcoming lottery, and the Minnesota Timberwolves pick, they got to hit on those picks in order to keep this going and sustain it. And then also with the mid-level, add a veteran, and then they need. I mean, I think Draymond is you got to worry about how he played last season, and if he can recapture the old magic. If they do that, they can get back in the mix. But I don't think that they're going to be a prohibitive favorite or the favorite, probably again with this particular core.
Ethan, you like Coach and Henry, and I do as well. You're always thinking about ways to tinker with the league and make it better. Do you think that we actually get that with this sort of hiatus we have right now? I mean, Adam talked to Rachel last night and floated some ideas out there. I mean, this is really an opportunity for us to change this league. And I always say it's the best league in the world. How do we make it reflect in every possible way?
I love how you put it right there, because I feel the same way about it. I'm not complaining about aspects of the NBA because I hate the NBA. I complain because I love the NBA. I want it to be distributed in such a way that people can see what's so great about it, as opposed to the current setup where it's just 82 games and no fan even knows what their team is doing 2 weeks from now. So I think it's almost too early to say. I want us to be assured that we're getting sports back first, but there is a possibility that in the chaos and out of this really bad story that we're enduring as a world, we might see something a little different as far as the NBA starting later. And just having a little bit of that absence makes the heart grow fonder dynamic where we can come back to it. And I do think maybe it should start on Christmas. I think that the NBA got the best ratings it ever got since Michael Jordan in the lockout season, which shouldn't have happened in theory, right? That's bad press all the way around. That's not good press, the lockout. And you have no promotional material for the NBA season in that year when it happens. And yet, just because you chopped off a chunk of the season, fans were hungry for it and they watched in droves. And I think there's a lesson there that perhaps less is more if the owners could ever sacrifice it.
I missed a question earlier from Randy. Ethan, to an outsider, Clay and Curry seem genuinely. Oh, now my connection's bad, isn't it? Can you hear me?
No,
yeah, they're pretty. They're happy overall.
Okay.
I mean, I think it was somebody asking if they are actually happy. Yeah. I think that they are more well balanced and happier than the average player. Certainly, they come at it from different ways. With Clay, there's a little bit of a decadent myopia where it's incredible that everybody loves him and he's so endearing, even though he's just in his own world in a way, which is, I think, unusual. And I guess it's because it doesn't seem like he needs that much from other people in order to validate him. And maybe that's why. But yeah, he'll show up late to practice and people will go, Spacey Clay, he doesn't know when practice is. And there's this sort of weird Clay immunity that he exists with that I've never quite figured it out. But yet everybody loves Clay.
He's good-natured.
He's good.
Having dads who were pros really helped them.
Yeah,
really helps.
Asher's going?
All right. Speaking of dads.
Bye. Bye.
All right, you guys. We will be back again tomorrow. Ethan, thank you so much.
Of course. This
David,
is great.
Gerard, we'll
Be
see
safe,
you.
everyone.
See you tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat place. Thank you.